and I started to read St. John of the Cross's poetry. And when I read it, it made me cry. I actually cried. I thought, I get this guy. I really get this guy. Well, St. John of the Cross was this guy during the Spanish Inquisition that was really considered extremely holy. He didn't want wealth. He was trying to reform the whole church. Like, all this money and all this is ridiculous. But he ended up taking a lot of heat from people who were very wealthy, and they actually arrested him, put him into a closet size, and they all he asked for was paper and a pen. And he heard a guy walking by under the street while he was in prison singing, and then he started to write poetry. And so his poetry is like really deep stuff, and it's just beautiful poetry about loving God and about putting away all the world and all the troubles of the world. And you just love God, and then his whole story of growing up poor and being locked away in prison, and then in the end he just dies on a cold slab. They just leave him out in the cold as an old monk. This is what I wrote. The flight of the solitary bird has begun here in the desolate place among the mountains of South Korea near Wonsan, October of '84. Now what I like, the solitary bird was, John had this thing called the solitary bird. If you wanted to reach God, you had to be this solitary bird. You had to fly high, seek a height, have your beak stretched out. You had to fly with no friends or companions or desires, and sing sweetly. That's his philosophy. So I wrote that in my book. My flight was beginning in October 1984 in Wonsan, South Korea. So the whole way through, as I went through the mountains in my Marine Corps experience, I wrote stories and things that happened to me in the event, and it just was like almost a diary within the book. So it's a treasure for me still, at the age of 55. When I was 18, I went to seminary to be a Catholic priest. Well, during my first year there in 1982, I was in the library and I was just reading in the book sections. I would just sit on the floor and read books. I came across this book, this beat up old red book, and I started to read St. John of the Cross's poetry. And when I read it, it made me cry. I actually cried. I thought, I get this guy. I really get this guy. So, at that time in my life, I checked it out. And like a year later in seminary, I decided, well, I want to do something different. So I joined the Marine Corps. I did something different. Well, I stole this book. I never turned it back in. But I paid for it 20 years later. I did. I went back, but I took this book and I took it with me in the Marine Corps. And when I went to South Korea, I had this in my backpack the whole way across South Korea. I read John of the Cross all the way across. Well, I'll tell you, because this book has been to South Korea, the Panama Canal, the Mediterranean. I always had it in a plastic bag wrapped in there with me. And it's how I stayed grounded, because if you're in the military, a lot of people will come back with the PTSD, and they'll have all these bad adjustments. I didn't have any of that, because I really stuck close to my faith. This book kept me close to my faith. Because, when everybody else was, because when you're 19 and 20, there's prostitutes and alcohol. Just everything bad can happen in those camps. And I had my holy book with me. So one time, I went to a Korean Buddhist temple. We all had liberty, and I was in the temple with a bunch of Buddhists. And I was sitting in their rock gardens with this book, with my John of the Cross book. It was cool. So it was really, this kept my faith close to me. So, because John of the Cross, being that mystical doctor, he was always so like, it's between you and God, no church, no religion. Even though he was a Catholic monk, priest, he was really beyond his years. There's nothing between you and God but you and God. Not even Jesus. Like he wasn't even Jesus. He didn't use the name Jesus much. It was God, God the Father, and He would. The God was the bride. He was the groom. He looked at God as being married to God. God was my. It was everything to Him. So I've kind of used that all my life. So the very important events of the day my sons get married, or the day I get a grandchild, I'm sure I'll write a verse, and I'll put all that to. Because this book has totally influenced my faith all my life. So I've used the book to temper myself. Like I don't. I've never tried to go. Like right now, I'm working on my doctorate. So I've never tried to make like I'm gonna make $1 million. That's never been my goal, and that's because of John. My goal has always been how can I be closer to God and still maintain a family life? Because I don't want to be a monk. I don't want to be a priest. But how can I own a home, have a family, and not oppress everybody? Like just be kind to people as you can be. That's the influence has been on me all my life since the day I found